Now, the hugely popular comedian Rik Mayall, the man who gave voice to a post-punk generation, was found dead at his home today. The police say there were no suspicious circumstances. He just died. Selfish bastard, said his friend and collaborator Adrian Edmondson, with whom he wrote numberless sketches. Many others paid generous tribute to a man who seemed to express an entire period of British history.
Flash by name, Flash by nature. Hooray! Hooray! Where have you been? Where haven't I been? Woof!
With timing second to none, Rik Mayall burst onto British TV screens. Everyone has a favourite male character. Lord Flashheart may be yours.
Thanks, bridesmaid, like the beard. Gives me something to hang on to.
But part of his comedy genius was he created so many characters.
Most of my work's based in Redditch. Sometimes the library, sometimes, somewhere else.
Kevin Turvey was an early creation, that roving reporter from Redditch who still lived with his mum and investigated very little.
Fish that I like. Cod, whales, that's the fish, right, not the plant.
Let's have a spokesman for Britain's youth.
But it was this obnoxious anarchist that British youth audiences took to their hearts.
My name's, Rick.
You put that back! That's my personal property!
You just said all property's theft, Rick.
Well, yes, it is.
Yeah, but so I'm nicking it. Stop!
His collaboration with Adrian Edmondson, who he'd met at Manchester University, changed the face of British comedy.
I think Rick was part of a generation who took on the establishment. It became known as alternative comedy.
Prick is a Wonka, signed the rest of the club.
Yes. Yes, now that was a sort of in-joke that we had in my form.
They were prepared to take on the establishment, to be riotous in the way they performed their comedy, to be very, very bold. In the 80s, there was perhaps less deference then, and that the young ones perhaps stood for that. That's one of the reasons why it divided people. It was not a deferential show, and that was to do with politics, but also their famous appearance, the young ones, on University Challenge.
Who's been tampering with my question cards?
It was me! It was me!
All the anarchy that you saw was always very well prepared. It was the sort of anarchy that takes 6 months to get right.
Steve Nallen was Margaret Thatcher to Rik Mayall's Alan Bastard.
There was a lovely moment where he wanted me to take my teeth out as Thatcher, and I said, I think I can make my mouth look as if it hasn't got any teeth in, because I could do my grandmother. And I said, Mrs. Thatcher will end up talking like that. And he just loved that. And he said, can we put more of that in?
I was just trying to be true to the spirit of Thatcherism.
All you care about is number one.
I thought that's what Thatcherism was all about.
Of course it is, of course.
He had great eyes for a comedian. So when he was doing Kevin Turvey, which he sort of sat on a chair and stared straight into camera, he was a sort of like a Ronnie Corbett on acid. And these, you could see into his head. It was like you could almost see the sort of electrical thunderstorm that was going off in his head. And that would come straight down the camera, and very, very few comedians have ever been able to do that trick. And that's why he was so brilliant on Jackanory.
I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning. So be a good boy and don't get up to mischief.
Rik Mayall was found dead at his home this lunchtime. He was just 56.
Well, that was Katie Razzle reporting. The Times columnist and devoted Rik Mayall fan Catelyn Moran is here. What was his appeal?
Well, I started watching him when I was 10, and I think there was something incredibly... I mean, what I connected to was he was incredibly childlike. If you look at everything that he's doing, it's that state of hyper-energy and unself-consciousness that you have when you're a 10-year-old kid, and you run in the room and you're screaming, and then you're just upside down, shouting rude words, and you're in love with rude words. There's nothing funnier or cleverer than using a rude word at that age. And he still had that as a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old. It's that childish kind of, I'm alive, I've got a face, I can say the word poo.
He's billed as an alternative comedian. Alternative to what?
Well, the main thing I get when I watch him is that First of all, there was an amazing intelligence there. I mean, I think there's this thing, there's a saying about how comedy is what you have when you've got intelligence left to burn. And, you know, obviously we know him for sort of silly faces and saying poo a lot. But, I mean, things like Bottom was actually based on Waiting for Godot. Him and Ade Edmondson had been in Waiting for Godot in theatre. And they were like, what if we did a version of this that was ruder and sillier and funnier? So it was this excess of energy. He was constantly on fire. Like, you watch the way that... I mean, I think one of the greatest cameos that we've ever had on British television in a sitcom is his Lord Flashheart in Blackadder. You know, he bursts through that doors. Apparently in the run-through, he didn't do that at all. He just walked through all of his blocking and stuff. And then when they went for the take, he just explodes through those doors. And you watch the cast who are there, which is Miranda Richardson, Stephen Fry, Rowan Atkinson, and they don't know what hit them. I mean, you watch their reaction shots to that and they're like, what is going on here? And if you ask people about Blackadder, people think that Rik was in that and he was like one of the main characters. But he was in that series for less than 5 minutes, but it makes such an impact. And there was an interesting conversation on Facebook going on about him, about how different he was to most British comedians. He does a thing that a lot of American comedians do, comedians like Jack Black or John Belushi, where it's you come in the room and you own it. It's like, what are you going to do? Let's play, what Chris Rock does as well. Usually British comedy is much more kind of characterful or kind of, you know, sort of like playing with words and stuff, and he could do that as well, but he came in and he was a rock star. He owned the room.
And that time that he appeared and that school of comedy appeared, the 1980s, this is... you know, it was a pretty tough time otherwise, wasn't it?
Well, he was great for that. I mean, in The Young Ones, where he plays... I mean, it's very difficult now, you know, and I speak as someone who likes to be funny but also likes to write about politics. It's very difficult to write about sort of politics and try and be sort of honest and passionate about it without sounding like Rik did in The Young Ones. Just that kind of, you know, just like, down with Thatcher's junta, kind of like, you know, that childlike, I've got some great dungarees on. You do, you know, very often when I watch people talking about young people, particularly talking about politics, you're just like, you need to watch The Young Ones. You're making some fundamental mistakes here. You are just... But, he, you know, but the naivety that he had in that as well, because alternative comedy at that time, and people would say, what is that the alternative to? And again, it was this childlike, sort of perpetually teenage view of the world that we hadn't had before. You know, he was just perpetually astonished by the world. And I've never seen anybody enjoy having a face more than Rik Mayall did. If you watch what he did with his face, he was actually a very beautiful man in repose, but he was completely egoless about it. He would gurn and he would clown and he would throw himself on the floor and make himself look as ugly as possible. And he always seemed to have about 5 more muscles than any other person in his
it was
face.
young people speaking to young people, wasn't it?
Well, that's well, sitting on Twitter today, like I've sort of watched a lot of celebrity deaths happen on Twitter, like, you know, Amy Winehouse or, you know, Michael Jackson or Elizabeth Taylor. I've never seen more of an outpouring of love for any celebrity than I've seen for Rik Mayall. Everyone was posting their favourite clips, and it was across his entire career. They either loved him from The Young Ones or from Bottom, Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, Jack and Ori, which he was amazing in, Drop Dead Fred. And it's because we watched him when we were kids, and you saw someone like you on television. You were like, that's exactly what I would do if I was on television. I would smash a television over someone's head, and I would say the word poo, and I would gurn as much as possible and explode.
Do you think, I mean, who are his heirs?
God, in terms... I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, in terms of charisma, I mean, you watch someone... That's very difficult. I mean, the childlikeness, the childlike quality that Eddie Izzard brings to stuff and that kind of rock and roll thing, I guess. I don't know, really. It was odd because his career was cut short. We thought he was going to go off and be a big Hollywood star when he did Drop Dead Fred, and then that all stopped after that, which, again, I think was part of the reason why people loved him so much and took it very personally when they heard that he died today, because he was still our little British secret. If you talk to Americans about him, they're like, who? And you start trying to explain to them, they're like,
there is
I don't
an
get
amazing warmth towards him.
Yes. Well, again, if you're a kid watching that, you know, you're watching, you know, it was one of the programmes you weren't allowed to watch, The Young Ones. You certainly weren't allowed to watch Bottom. So when you sort of sneak up and watch it and you're sitting there and this is kind of your secret, and you feel a kindred spirit there when you're watching it. And for me, he was a massive role model, you know, as a sort of gonky teenage adolescent girl, to watch him and Ade Edmondson in Bottom talking about girls and talking about how they'd be in the world. They're complete outsiders and loners, but they love each other. And I was like, that's actually an emulatable role model in a way that the girls on Sweet Valley High or in Dynasty are not.
Catherine, thanks. Well, that's all we have time for right now. There's been lots more tomorrow. Good night.